Earlier on in this series, I stopped for a while in the reading of the book The Fall by Albert Camus to talk about it for a little while. It was in episode 30. Having looked at that again now, I've realised that I actually made a couple of mistakes. One was that I gave the name of this character as Jean-Baptiste Clemenceau. In fact, it was Jean-Baptiste Clemence. I don't know why I put the O on the end. I think there was a Prime Minister of France back in the time of either the First or the Second World Wars called Clemenceau, so maybe that was in my mind. But that was Clem, not Clam, and this one doesn't have the O on the end, so it's just Clemence. So that was an error. Another much more serious one was the setting of the whole thing. I've done a bit of research on YouTube since then, and I realise now that if you're going to pontificate, which is what I was going to do, one really needs to be in front of rows of books, lots of books on shelves, not just in front of pictures or windows or walls. And I'm doing the same thing now, of course. So I'll stop this now and I'll find a more appropriate setting. I think that's the important thing to do. Okay, I've got some books here. I don't know, I think they're still really not the right thing, the kind of travel guide, so that's not really going to work, I don't think. Hang on. These are better. There's some poetry books and things, but there's also model cars on them, so you can't really pontificate with model cars, I don't think. And they're... hang on, just a minute. Yeah, these ones are not bad, but they're still model cars, and and there's even a model aeroplane there. And because the main problem, I just realised they're not leather, they're paperbacks. You need to have leather-bound books, and of course we need to have a deep leather armchair. So, just a minute, I'll see what I can. Okay, so we've got some heavy-bound stuff going on here now. So I'll just check. Now we've got poetical works of Wordsworth, poetical works of Browning. That's good. The Life of Tolstoy by Romain Rolland in German. Pretty good. But then we've also got Webster's International Dictionary. That's a bit silly. But and then the domestic. What's this? Domestic medical practice with 42 departments with 27 specialists, published in 1913. I think that's not really what we're looking for. So, and I still haven't got the leather armchair, so I think I'll just give up on this at the moment and just go back to what we were doing. So to return to the main business, pontificating. So in the first of these interludes, when we looked at this character in the novel The Fall, there was a suggestion that he was kind of a human representation almost of the devil himself. In the second part, between that first interlude and this, he seems much more human. So before he was sarcastic and liked to mock at people and mock himself, in the second part he seems really more to feel sorry for himself almost. Before he made much of the fact that he made these elaborate efforts to show acts of kindness and generosity and self-sacrifice to other people in need, his clients and people he met in the street. And he did that partly to persuade them that he was such a good person, or to persuade himself even that he was a good person. But there was there was kind of a game to it, really, in that while he was doing that, while he was creating this good image of himself, he was always aware that he wasn't really like that at all, that it was actually a kind of a meanness in his character. And the game was that he enjoyed contemplating that meanness in his own soul while being aware that he had convinced other people how good he was and how kind and generous he was. And he enjoyed that discrepancy. But for that game to have any meaning and for him to really be able to complete that trickery, he had to know that there was some meanness in his own soul, and even to be pleased that it was there, so that he could play that trick on people. But now he seems to be regretting those mean and bad and unpleasant features of his soul. And rather than laughing at himself and others, he's kind of feeling sorry for himself and regretting some of the things he's done. That's what it seems to be anyway. I'm not sure if that's the intention of the author. But some of the things that he regrets is the obvious one of how he allowed this woman who was apparently attempting suicide by jumping into the river. Just after he'd walked past her, he allowed her to float down the river, even though she apparently regretted what she'd done and called out for help. He made no attempt to help her at all and just apparently allowed her to drown. But that troubled him greatly afterwards. There's perhaps a suggestion that that woman may have been one of his actual girlfriends. We don't really know that. There's maybe just a slight hint of a suggestion of that when he says that he'd just left someone just before he walked across the bridge and this other woman jumped into the river. At one stage he says too that he came to the conclusion that other people existed really, or he seemed to feel that they should exist merely for his benefit. And again, he's not happy with that thought any longer. One of the things that bothered him most was that mysterious laughter that he heard behind him, even before the encounter with the suicidal woman. And one of the most disturbing things about that laughter was it wasn't mocking or scornful or critical of him, but it was more, he says, tender, and that's what bothered him the most. So that's where he seems to have come to. So he's more a human figure. He's not an arch fiend. But someone who's kind of regretting some of the features of his own nature. And then there's the interesting thing, his teasing of the intellectual atheists that he's familiar with, talking of God in their presence so that he can see their discomfort and their almost hysterical reaction to that. And interestingly too, his name is, as mentioned, is Clemenceau. His name is Jean-Baptiste Clemence. No, Clemence, not Clemenceau. Jean-Baptiste Clemence. Jean-Baptiste, of course, is John the Baptist. And I'm sure that Camus must have had some reason for giving him that name. So the interesting thing about John the Baptist is that he's described as the greatest of the prophets. So all through the Old Testament, there are lots of prophets who were predicting that a Messiah was going to come, the person who was going to make everything right and save the nation, save people and set everything right again. They didn't know who it was or when it would be, but it was John the Baptist who actually was the one who recognised the Christ when he was there. He said, this is him, this is the one where everyone's been looking for. And that's why he was the greatest of the prophets. He actually recognised the Christ. So why is this man called Jean-Baptiste Clemence? It's interesting, really. Anyway, so I guess if we were doing a university course in philosophy or French literature or something, and we're writing an essay about Albert Camus, if one didn't mention these big words, existentialism and the absurd, I think that would probably mean an automatic fail. And I suppose they will have to be mentioned sometime in these talks, but I'm trying as much as I can to put off the evil hour. One day we'll probably have to mention them. In the meantime, though, we'll get on with the story. I read this book quite a few years ago. I haven't actually read it all the way through yet this time. I've just been reading a chapter or part of a chapter each week and getting ready to present it in these little talks. So I haven't read to the end yet, so I'm not quite sure how it actually ends, so I'll be interested to find that out myself. Anyway, so we'll get back to the story again next week.